For today's video, we're going to be discussing the act of leveling in video games, a time-honored system that has been here since the beginning of the industry, and how I feel that it may not, at least in its traditional form, hold up with today's gameplay loops. Leveling has been an essential part of video games when it comes to abstraction since the very beginning. From CRPGs, pen and paper, you name it. And it has become an effective system whenever you are trying to abstract progression in a video game, regardless of its design or genre, despite the fact that it, of course, has been featured heavily in RPG-based systems. But the use of leveling serves several big purposes. The first is that it's a very easy way for a player to compartmentalize their progress. If I'm level 1 and this guy's level 10, I shouldn't be fighting him. If I'm level 60 and these guys are level 3, it makes no sense for me to spend my time here. From a pacing or world design standpoint, it allows the designer to effectively gate or cordon off specific areas of the game to make sure that the player is going where they want to at any specific time. If your zones are set up 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 16, then that's how the player is going to go, and you can frame your story or pace out your designs as such. From a gameplay standpoint, it allows you to, again, lock the player's options down to the bare minimums and give them a nice little carrot on the end of the stick to go for with each new level. In Diablo 3, for instance, every level from 1 to 70 unlocks something new. A new skill, a new talent rune, or a talent gem, whatever it's called, and so on. And this also makes it so that the player is not hit over the head with 70 levels of skills, talents, masteries, whatever, to unlock. And this has been a very effective way of making the new player experience really great for MMO design. When you play games like World of Warcraft, DC Universe Online, or any other MMO that you can imagine, the first 5 to 10 levels are heavily supervised by the game. They want to make sure that you know everything there is about the core gameplay loop before they kind of let you off the leash and do your own thing. Some MMOs wait until you're, at the level cap before they let you basically off the reservation. But the point is that the leveling system here is used to guide the player. Another design example is that it can also be used as a way of the designer to have a rough idea of what the player can or can't do. If you have some amazing overpowered skill that unlocks at level 50, well, you don't have to worry about that for any challenge or quest from level 1 to 49 because the player doesn't have access to that yet. Another point is that it allows you to design loot or loot tables and kind of keep it in match or in line with the enemies. If I know, for instance, that a level 15 enemy does, let's say, 1,500 points of damage, then I know that the loot table around that point must be designed to allow players to survive 1,500 points of damage. Likewise, if I know that the weapons the player drops will do, let's say, 800 points of damage, well then I have to adjust my enemy levels or my enemy's health accordingly to make it easier or harder. And again, that is the real purpose of a leveling system when we talk about games traditionally. It does a lot to make it simple for both the designer and the player to understand where everyone is at in terms of power. And while that's all well and good, it is starting, or at least for me, it's starting to feel very limiting and very mechanical in games today. And more specifically, with how many games these days are combining action and RPG design into a single experience. Whether it is the leveling up of Call of Duty, to getting new guns in Borderlands, increasing your agent's power in Division, and you name it. What we're seeing are more games having an action or a player-focused progression, and then layering an RPG system on top of that. And again, leveling up an RPG progression is a very effective way of showing scale and allowing the player to understand just where they're at. And again, there's definitely that endorphin release every time you level up and you see those magic words on the screen as you get some new power. But the problem is that action and abstracted based design are kind of like oil and water. They don't necessarily mix all together, and when you have those clashes, it really brings down the design and really removes any, or it destroys any semblance of emergent gameplay or giving the player the freedom to play the game how they see fit. And we have seen this especially in games such as God of War. In the last God of War game, they used a leveling system, or a gear level system, to define how strong Kratos was at any given point in the game. It was an entirely abstracted system that has no bearings on the combo moves you have, what your weapons can do in terms of their overall moveset, or even just how you play the game at all. It's simply just this abstracted layer that dictates whether or not an enemy can kill you easily. And it's such a binary system that it really hurt that game for me. What they did was, if an enemy was 4 levels or more above you, you were immediately killed by it. It didn't matter what tactics you used, didn't matter how great you played. If that enemy just hit you one time, it was going to kill you. But here's the sneaky little secret here. I could take my gear on that same exact enemy and let's say reorganize it so maybe I'm just 1 level above what I was before, and suddenly I can fight that enemy like it was normal, or at least a little bit easier. It's the same thing we saw in Borderlands and the Division and other action-based designs that feature RPG progression. It's very artificial, and it really, again, renders a lot of the player choices moot. And this is a problem that I'm having with the Division. The Division and Division 2 feature very low level caps. You only get up to level 30 and then you've reached the end game. But it is a struggle for me to keep playing this game and knowing that I still have, I think I'm at like level 14 or 15 right now. I'm about halfway and it's just not working out for me. And there's several reasons why, and then we're going to switch to some game footage as I'm going to talk about a possible solution. So the first thing about leveling systems, again, is that it is a very arbitrary way of locking the player from content. Again, when you're playing games like The Division or Borderlands, if you're fighting an enemy who's 3 or 4 levels above you, they're not doing anything different. There is no greater tactic or strategic play here. It's basically, this enemy will do 10 times more damage to you, big deal, go do something else. And it locks the player and forces them to do the leveling grind, even if their skills are on point. While I'm playing Division 2, if I can constantly get headshots, that doesn't mean anything if the enemy is higher than my level or higher than my weapons level. That's another big point about abstraction, is that it gets in the way or it downplays player skill. It doesn't matter if I'm the best, 360 no-scope sniper in the Division 2, if my gun is, let's say, level 5, and I'm fighting level 15 enemies. That's what we talked about in a piece earlier regarding dissonance. That it's a realistic game, we're supposed to be, in war-torn Washington, D.C., but I'm shooting a guy in the face 10 times and they're not falling down. And the problem, though, or a greater issue when it comes to leveling systems, is how the leveling is basically being affected by the player. What that means is, how is the player growing in power? How is the leveling measuring it? This is a very interesting issue that happened in the Elder Scrolls Skyrim. What they did in Skyrim was basically said that, okay, you're going to pick your primary skills from a list here. There's stuff like one-hand weapons, two-hand weapons, running, swimming, jumping, stealth, you name it. And then you pick secondary skills. So your level is determined by what your primary skills are. Now that sounds alright, except for one little problem. Whatever your primary or your level is, the enemies around you will always scale to that level or a little bit higher. But what happens if I don't take an offensive skill as one of my primaries? Well, guess what? It means that even though I may be level 10 in terms of my primary level, I may only be able to use weapons at a level 4 or 5 level. But you're forcing me to fight level 10 and 11 enemies, and I'm basically SOL. And a lot of people ruin their characters when they first started playing the game because of that. And this again is where you have to be really careful about how leveling is measuring the player's skills. And like I said, in many cases, the leveling system is not deep enough to warrant the game's or the player's progression. When I play Borderlands, by the time I hit level 10 in that game, I know everything there is about the core gameplay loop. There is nothing more for the game to teach me, there is nothing more mechanics-wise for the game to show me. I still have 49 to 59 more levels before I hit that cap. The same goes to Division 2. By the time you hit level 5, maybe pushing at level 8 or 9, you should know exactly how that game plays. But you're still forced into that grind until you get to the end. And that also means that all your choices in terms of gear beforehand doesn't matter in the slightest. Because the difference between a level 29 weapon and an end of level cap weapon is huge. It was the same thing they did with Diablo 3. And what that means is that it doesn't even make sense to focus on those choices, because the second you hit the end level or the end cap, now again the real game begins here. So the question now turns to, is there a better way of handling leveling systems? And I'm not going to be so bold to say this is the perfect one, but I want to talk about a few games that have done things in a way that I do like, and I want to see what you think about that. But before we do that, a quick word to our Patreon supporters and sponsors. And now for a quick thank you to our Patreon backers, as well as to our current Game Wisdom sponsors. And if you'd like to continue this discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, linked down below. If you're a fan of Game Wisdom and looking for a little bit of collectible swag, anyone who donates $25 or more via Super Chat or on patreon.com/wbicer will get your hands on this lovely little Josh box. This is a hand-detailed box that comes with a USB drive containing 10 hours of some of my favorite podcasts done throughout the years. This is only available for the month of April 2019. Afterwards, we'll have to weigh in and see if people want more Josh boxes in the future. So if you're interested, be sure to get those donations in now before this offer runs out. Here we return to Diablo 3. And when it comes to getting rid of the traditional leveling curve or leveling progression model, I think Diablo 3 got better as it developed further along, especially following patch 1.04 and the Reaper of Souls expansion. But the first thing that Blizzard did was something that was very simple in practice, but it's actually quite hard to do. And that is design the leveling curve so that it only lasts as long as you can keep introducing new elements to the player. In Diablo 3 here, every level from 1 to 70 will unlock something new. It can be as big as a new skill to as small as a new talent point that you can apply to your character. The point being that you never go a level without getting something new. And I have played many games that have failed to learn that lesson. Many older MMOs used to only give you something new like at level every 5 or 10 levels, and this can become very frustrating for a player to know that, yay, I leveled up and I got nothing. I gotta do it 4 or even 9 more times. Another point is that if you don't have new elements introduced to the player, then you need to keep that leveling curve small. Because once the player knows everything there is about your game or is not seeing anything new, then you gotta come up with something new to test them. One of the things that I liked about DC Universe Online was that the levels or the quests were explicitly set up that if you did everything, you were going to hit the end cap and then can immediately start not New Game Plus, but you can start the raid level content. This is a problem I'm having with the Division, that there are 30 levels to go through in that game, and I can tell you there are not 30 main missions to play. Instead, I think there's only 12 or 13. Don't have the map in front of me right now. But the point is that completing the main missions is the main form of progression in Division and in Division 2. This is how you get the skill points that allow you to unlock new abilities that you can then apply to your build. leveling up in a division does not get you anything new, or more specifically, anything that's game changing. You do get one like those little loot box crates, but that's about it. That's not the same as here in Diablo, where every new level gets you a new skill, or even something like Grim Dawn, where I can then apply more skill points to my talent trees. Again, the point is, you should only allow as many levels until you run out of new things to show to the player. This is the same problem that I had with Borderlands, and as we talked about in the last part, that you're going to learn a game like Borderlands or Division probably by level 5, level 10. There's still so many more levels to play that you're just going through the motions. And most importantly, all those levels don't mean anything when it comes to the end game. As we talked about, due to how loot tables and item scaling works, even if you find your favorite gun at level 5, that means nothing because the end gear is going to be explicitly set higher to kind of push you into that end content. Even going from level 29 to 30, or in Diablo 3 here, 69 to 70, is a very big deal. You also, in Diablo 3, as an interesting point, see a similar bump from level 59 to 60, because that was the original level cap before the expansion. But the other reason why Diablo 3 is an example, or is being shown here, when it comes to fighting traditional level, is what they did with the adventure mode. Following, I think this was either patch 1.0, 1.04, or the Reaper of Souls expansion, they introduced a new mode in the game called Adventure Mode. And Adventure Mode is basically Diablo 3 minus all the melodrama. No more Deckard Cain whining or talking about death. No more the woman's name who turns out to be Diablo. And yes, I'm spoiling the game there for you. It's just pure gameplay. And the thing that they did in the mode was, instead of basically scaling the content based on the axe, they use a world scaling system. You have the various difficulty modifiers. I think it's like normal, master, expert, torment, or I may be forgetting one or two in there. But as you go up in difficulty, the entire world scales accordingly. So you could very well start on normal play and be in Act 5 fighting those enemies and doing those quests, just as you could be in Act 1 and you're fighting like Torment level 10. And the level, or the difficulty levels, what they do is not only do they make the enemies harder, but they also increase the quality of the gear that you find. Specifically, you cannot find the quote-unquote endgame gear unless you are playing on at least Torment level 1. And I really like this because it removes the sense of leveling out of the progression, in a way that I don't have to worry about what level I am in Diablo 3 in order to have a good time. I can do any quest, fight any boss, go to any area, and whether I'm level 2 or level 70, I'm still going to get an experience, and the rest of it is built on my skill at the game. Now, like I said a few minutes ago, Division and Division 2 run into this problem, but they actually kind of solve it when you get to the end game. Because following the Division's major patch, they introduced the concept of a world tendency rating. And the world tendency rating is just their fancy way of having this kind of difficulty in the Division. As you go up in world tendency, all the enemies get harder, and the gear goes up in quality. What they do is that instead of having gear set to levels, they use a gear rating or GR system. So let's say at World Tendency 2, I will find gear at a gear rating of, let's say, 250. If I go up to World Tendency 3, I'm finding a gear rating of, let's say, 300. And this serves two very important points. Again, I'm able to play the game at whatever level I want to some extent, but it allows for there to always be a sense of progression. The problem that Diablo 3 ran into is that despite having like 14 or 15 torment levels, there is a kind of a soft endpoint or a wall of how strong gear can get. The highest possible gear you can get in Diablo 3, or at least the last time I played, was the Ancient Set variety. And that is super rare. That is very, very hard to get, and you're going to be doing a lot of grinding to get to that point. But once you get the ancient set that you want for your character, you are done with gear progression. There is nothing more that you can reasonably get that's going to affect your character. You can make the game harder still, but there's no more progression. And that really hurts. Again, the whole core gameplay of an ARPG. Fight monsters to get loot to become more powerful so you can fight more monsters. With the Division, their world tendency system, they can just keep scaling that up and up and up, and there will always be new gear and new things to achieve. And if they were smart, they would also start introducing new elements at certain tiers or certain thresholds of the world tendency rating. Like, let's say at world tendency 4, something new could drop, or at world tendency 7, a new enemy type can appear. Remember, the whole point of progression curves is to allow the players to start seeing and experiencing new content and show that sense of growth from beginning to middle to end game. And I would like to see more games adopt that as opposed to just having a flat leveling curve. Because one of the things that we've learned, especially over the last few years, is that having 150 levels in an MMO or an RPG style game is not all that exciting if there's only 20 to 30 levels of actual meaningful content. And this is one of the reasons why I have no intention to go back to older style MMOs, and also why Blizzard introduced the ability to just let you skip a lot of the levels. Because again, you're going to learn how your character plays relatively quickly, and then you're going to have to go through a lot of downtime content in order to get to where, again, quote-unquote, the real game begins. But to wrap things up for today's video, like I said, traditional leveling curves I just don't see, or leveling systems, don't really work in today's market with the greater introduction of action or real-time elements into these games, whether that is by adding RPG elements to an action game or action elements to an RPG. Because eventually, or very quickly, the player is going to learn exactly what they're going to be able to do in this game or how it works, and then it's just about pure progression. And locking elements or restricting the player based on an abstracted value doesn't really work if you're giving the player complete freedom to control their character. It's why I really got annoyed with God of War, why Division 2 is starting to drag on. And if you're going to have a leveling system, then you should only have it as much as you can keep introducing new content. The second you run out of content to show the player, then you got get them to, again, the quote-unquote real game. And like I said, allowing the player to manipulate the overall world difficulty and challenge themselves, I find that to be a much better system than just simply saying, you can't fight this guy until you do 30 hours of something else, or all these quests are locked until you get to level 20 or 50 or whatever. So for those of you watching this right now, can you think of games that did a really great job of keeping you motivated via leveling? And can you think of games that did not work? That you felt that you learned everything there is about the game, but there's still like 30 or 50 more levels before you can really start to get to the good stuff. But thank you so much for watching today's video. Be sure to come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. Until next time, have a great night. If you're looking for a book on design, my first title, 20 Essential Games to Study, is out now. It is available where most books are sold, and it comes in paper, hardcover, or digital copies. This is the perfect book for anyone interested in learning about game design, whether you are a student, enthusiast, or just a fan. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel link down below where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.